of brambleberry.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to make this landscape design soap. Now, if you've never made landscape design soap before, you're not going to believe this, but this is actually easier to make than it looks. And while this isn't quite suitable for like your beginner recipe, honestly, if you've got like 5 or 6 batches under your belt, you can totally make this. And that's because this recipe uses Brambleberry's latest quick mix. Brambleberry's new quick mix is called Gentle Quick Mix, and it's palm-free. It uses a high percentage of olive oil and canola oil, as well as castor oil for bubbles and mango butter for a little bit of hardening. It's basically impossible to overstick blend this recipe though because of all those slow-moving oils, which makes it ideal for making this kind of layered architectural soap design. Of course, because of its high percentage of canola and olive oil, it's ideal for slower moving recipe needs like swirling. I do really recommend using sodium lactate, especially with this recipe though. Sodium lactate is the salt of lactic acid. And in soap, what it does is help create a harder bar faster. It also creates a more shiny bar. In this recipe though, if you don't use it, you guys, you will be waiting for like 7, 8, 9 days to get your soap out of the molds. So I would definitely use it in this recipe. For this recipe, we are going to be using the Evergreen Forest Fragrance from Brambleberry. It's part of the Pacific Northwest collection, and don't let the name Evergreen scare you. Yes, it has some pine notes in it, but honestly, I'm a huge avid hiker, and this smells a lot like right when you're coming out of the forest but entering like the meadow. That's what this smells like. It's really bright, herbaceous, some green notes, some ozone notes, and yes, floral notes as well. I love it. And for this recipe, it actually speeds up trace just enough so that we can have the slow-moving oil recipe. Remember, no palm oil. The slow-moving palm-free recipe gets sped up just enough because of the slight acceleration so that we are able to make these amazing mounds. Now back to that palm. If you really want to create like a lot bigger peaks, like say you want your mountain to kind of come out or whatever, you might actually want some palm oil or some harder butters like cocoa butter in your recipe. So something to keep in mind as you're getting more advanced in your kind of layered structural architectural soap designs. Couple other things about this recipe. One, I wanted it to actually come out of the mold within a week, which is why sodium lactate, but also did a 10% water discount. So that will help the soap come out of the mold faster. And then also put this on a heating gel pad right after I made it. And that helps to promote the saponification process and also helps any excess water come out of the bar sooner so you can unmold more quickly. Once we're done making our soap, I'll show you how I did that. Now, if you're unfamiliar with quick mixes, this is a concept that Brambleberry pioneered, and they are basically pre-made, pre-batched oils for any kind of your soap making needs. They come in these handy dandy meltable, like you can microwave this and you can melt the oils inside of this, either in microwave or boiling water. So they come in these handy dandy little heat-safe flasks, and that really saves you a lot of time with your weighing out and your formulation needs, because Brambleberry has them for swirling, palm-free, for lots of lather, really cool stuff. Before we get started, of course, I'm gonna suit up for safety. I've got my quick mix melted already, and it's about 120 to 130 degrees. It's a little hotter than I sometimes soap, but for this recipe, remember, I really want it to go through gel phase, so it is pretty warm. I've added my sodium lactate to the lye water already. So that is already in there. Brambleberry goggles on, Brambleberry stick blender, and we're ready to go. Pouring my lye water gently down the shaft of the stick blender just to decrease any bubbles that are in there. Bubbles in the soap aren't that big of a deal, like air bubbles, but from an aesthetic standpoint, I like to avoid them. And so pouring gently down the shaft of the stick blender does help that. Now this recipe, almost impossible to over stick blend. Again, making it really good for beginner soap makers. So one of the things I really like to do is stick blend for a while and then pause and kind of stir. And the reason for that is this kind of centrifugal force all is in one area. And I don't want just kind of the middle bottom part of this getting really thick. I want the whole thing to be evenly mixed. Plus when I do that, it gives me a chance to kind of look at the color and observe if there's any color differences in my batch. color differences, you guys, if you're seeing like white trailings and some clearer trailings and some more yellow trailings, that tells you you need to stick blend more and you really need to incorporate all your oils in. I'm gonna add fragrance to the entire batch. Again, we want this to be pretty thick. Normally I would often add the fragrance to the individual color containers, but in this case, we're gonna add it to the entire batch. And now I'm gonna split my batch, and I'm eyeballing it using these really cool easy pour containers, which I love to work with because of this awesome pouring spout. And the amounts that I'm pouring in, you notice, are different, and I'm gonna have that in the notes section below. Now I'm gonna add my color. This is the green Oxide Pigment from Brambleberry. It's really great because it provides a fantastic color and it's also stable, meaning it won't morph in here. So this is gonna be my lighter green. So I used a little bit less of that green Oxide, and then I'm gonna be using 1 teaspoon of titanium dioxide that I've pre-mixed with a little bit of sweet almond oil. All of these oxides have been pre-mixed already to get rid of any clumps. I'm gonna make my sky with the Zippy blue pigment, and it doesn't take very much. This is just half a teaspoon of that Zippy blue. And again, with the Zippy blue, I've kind of mixed it up so that there's no clumps in it. For our mountain, and this is kind of where you get a little bit of artist choice, I'm going with about 1/8 of a teaspoon of the black iron oxide. And you could do a little more, a little less. You can add a little bit of white to make it more gray, totally up to you. Remember though, black iron oxide is one of those colorants that it's really easy to use too much. And if you use too much of this one, this will lather black. Now I'm just whisking in all of my colorant, and this is really fantastic. It's a great consistency. I'm very excited about making my grass with this. I've got different whisks for the different colors just because I really want my colorants to be very obviously have some good color differentiation, since this is an architectural and structural design. If your soap is pretty thin at this point and you're like, this is never gonna hold a peak, you can always stick blend at this point. However, since I really stick blended at the forefront, it's pretty thick already. Like this is good. This is gonna hold peaks for us. Another thing I notice really affects the peaks is the temperature in your house. So if you're soaping in a really warm environment, this recipe might take longer for you than it is for me today. So right now I'm just gonna work with the greens. So just set your kind of blue and your gray aside. I'm gonna bring in my mold and start from there. And I wanna make sure that I kind of, so this is a choose your own adventure, right? I can get as complicated as I want. I can just do ploppy swirls, or I can do just one color and then one color and then one color. I have really gone all over the map with these types of designs, like to the point where I've put in calendula petals, for example, to kind of mimic grass. So I'm looking at this and it's probably pretty good, but just be on the safe side, I'm gonna stick blend it. It's the consistency of kind of a pudding at this point, but I really want it to be the consistency of, I don't know, a soft serve ice cream. Okay, now this is a little bit thicker. I'm feeling a little bit better about it, actually sustaining some peaks here. And I'm just gonna pour gently down the side, kind of this side, because I really want, again, I want this to be structural. I want this to look like it could be a mountain meadow. And we're gonna end up with the green covering our whole kind of bottom, because that's our base for our meadow. But I think that the texture looks really good when we can kind of mound it up on one side a little bit more. So now I'm just gonna kind of mound a little bit before I do my light green. And I can actually either try and pour the light green, or I can plop the light green. I'm just gonna use a spoon to kind of gently layer in here. And that's also because that'll give me a little bit more control over the design here. And I have less of my light green than I do my green. So it's important to be a little judicious in what you end up using. I'm just doing kind of a ploppy layer, and the original darker green is holding really beautifully. And now I'm just layering in that light green and giving it some texture. Right? This is our mountain meadow, so it's good to give it texture. And know, you can do whatever you want here. So again, you could do 3 colors of green, you could have a little bit of brown on the bottom. This is really a choose your own adventure type of soap making process. And I like this. I like what we did, again, because I think it's really good for beginners. But you could definitely do more green variations, more layers. Really, it's soap, so you have a lot of artistic expression options. I've got all my white, got all my light green done. So now I'm just gonna gently spoon in my green, because this is my mountain forest layer. So I'm just gonna spoon over this darker green for some contrast. And however you wanna do this, it's gonna be perfect. I can't wait to see what you create, actually. So make sure when you are making this that you hashtag your creations, hashtag Bramble on, so we can see them on Twitter and on Instagram and post them onto our Facebook page. We love to see what you make with these videos. So now let's take a look at this and see, do I think that this is gonna sustain peaks? Honestly, this is probably pretty good, but just to be on the safe side, I'm just gonna give it another stick blend. That's why I love having extra stick blender heads. And now it's time to mound the mountain. So take your spoon, and really what you're looking for is right down the middle. Now this is going to naturally mound down and make a mountain shape, so you don't really have to worry too much about shaping it quite yet. So just take your gray and just keep mounding it in the middle. After this is done, that's when we take our spoon and we gently make our mountain shape, but just keep going down the middle. This is smelling so good right now. I love that new Pacific Northwest collection, the entire thing. It just reminds me so much of this beautiful place I call home. Maybe if you didn't know, Brambleberry is located in Bellingham, Washington, which is north of Seattle, which is why we created this collection, to pay homage to our beautiful state and the area that we live in. Now it's time to mound this, and again, this is soap, it's artistic preference. I'm gonna use a slightly smaller spoon. I think that might be a little easier. Just gonna get right in there and make my mountain. And this mountain is gonna get covered with blue, right, for our clouds. And if you are a really advanced soaper and you're feeling like you want some white clouds, you can totally put some white clouds in on this next layer too. And again, I really want to see what you do with this. I can't wait to see all the variations that end up coming out after this video. So as you can see, I've got a really nice peak going. What you might notice though is kind of on the butts of the soap, it is hard to get the perfect amount of soap all the way out to the kind of the end pieces. So you might end up kind of just cutting this like ½ an inch in, so you have perfect mounds of soap if you don't want these end designs to just be a little short. Now it's time to make our blue for our sky. So I'm just gonna gently plop in this soap. And by plop, I really mean gently, because we really don't want it to break through our perfect mountain design. So just kind of gently spoon that soap in, and you'll notice how well this entire recipe is behaving. Like, it is still very pliable, and it's moving beautifully and fluidly, even though it's been sitting there for quite some time, and we did stick blend it within about an inch of its life. Now that I've got my sides kind of done, I really am gonna start focusing on the top, because I wanna make sure that the entire mountain is covered by my clouds. One thing to keep in mind with this recipe is you want to, definitely get down the sides, but you also really want to get your top in there, because what's funny, when we were experimenting in studio with this recipe, we kind of decided we liked the mountain being underneath the clouds and having the blue really just covering the whole mountain. We did experiment with having the mountain kind of come out the top, but we liked it better with that. So just make sure you're saving enough for the middle to put those clouds in. So now, last touch, just gonna do a little bit of the Brambleberry Super Pearly White Mica on top, kind of like clouds or maybe little stars at night. It's just a fun little touch, and I love the way that the mica looks after gel phase. It gets more metallic, almost, just like a metallic look as opposed to like the sparkly look, and I love it. I really want this soap to go through gel phase because I want it to come out faster and harder. So a couple things. If you have a textured top and you're like, how in the world am I going to insulate? This is just a shoebox, and I just kind of gently kind of put it on the top like this. And the reason I do that is because that heat rising, I want it to stay in there as long as possible. And then this is what our heat pad looks like. It's kind of gross, it's gnarly. It's my production heat pad, but this is just a basic one that you can get at, any Bed Bath & Beyond type store, Fred Meyer's. And we use this to help promote gel phase. So totally up to you depending on the ambient temperature of your area, but 30 minutes on high will usually force us into gel phase. An hour on high in the winter will force your entire soap into gel phase. Remember though, if it gets too hot, it will crack down the center. So it's kind of an art/science on how hot you want to get this for how long. I made this 3 days ago. This has been in the freezer for just about an hour because I wanted to be able to hopefully pop this out for you on camera. So I love the Brambleberry silicone molds because they do really slide out easily. So this is coming out well with an hour of freezing time and made 3 days ago. I don't think it would have come out, by the way, nearly this good without that freezing time. So this is the Brambleberry multi-bar cutter, and I'm just gonna kind of slide it into focus so you can see how it works. Strings that do the cutting. This does so well with cold process soap, and if you're cutting challenged like I am, it cuts basically your bar's perfect width. And it's got little kind of divots here, so you just slide the soap in, and this takes a little bit of core strength. I'm at a disadvantage because I'm over a table like this. So if I struggle, try not to laugh. Yeah, I'm struggling. I feel like getting on top of the table. Okay. Okay, yeah, this is far. I'm leaning over too far. I'm struggling. I'm gonna pull this towards me, even though it's not the best camera angle. I'm sorry. That way I can actually get this cut for you. There we go. So this really takes a little bit of elbow grease, but don't worry. It does work. Did you hear that satisfying click? So now you can just pull your bars out and we can see how this looks. Oh, perfect. I'm so excited. It looks wonderful. Each of these look a little different, which is perfect. They're also a little cold because of course they just came out of the freezer. They will probably sweat just a little bit. So keep that in mind if you're using the freezer at all. I love how the differences in my grass look. It's fantastic. And remember how I said that this kind of looks metallic when it's done with gel phase? It looks really fantastic. Metallic, kind of silver. And then it's tiny little slice. Also, remember how I said the ends were kind of hard to turn into like a real mountain? So you wanted to do just about an inch off the ends? See this little guy, he's fine, but he's not perfect, which is why he's kind of gonna be a scrap, gonna be a tester. So now they just need to sit and cure for about 4 to 6 weeks before you use them, sell them, or give them away. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial, and I look forward to seeing what you create with #BrambleOn on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. Bye. Yeah, I'm struggling. I feel like getting on top of the table. Okay.
Pull it towards you.
Do you want me to get on top of the table?
Say.
And we're ready to go. Sort of. A little bit, maybe.